Hey everyone, I'm back, and today we're going to be talking about The Raid 2, and this movie came out in 2014, and it's a sequel to The Raid Redemption, and I enjoyed this movie overall, and in ways I think this movie is better than the first movie, but in other ways I think the first movie is better than this movie. It's kind of like, there are things that are different, there are some changes, but overall, do I think these changes benefit this movie? Yes and no. And I'll start off with, what I liked about this movie. First off, I liked how this movie expanded the universe in which this film takes place in, and that was kind of cool and interesting. I loved the action sequences, and it was nice and bloody and violent, just like the first movie. And I think the performances in this movie are very good, and I really liked the characters, especially the antagonists. I didn't like them as much as the antagonists in the first movie. And overall, I would say this movie is less memorable than the first one. As much as I like a lot of what's going on in this movie, it's just not as memorable to me. In terms of a story that I'm going to remember, I'm going to remember the first movie, not so much this one, because it didn't impact me as much. And partially that has to do with the fact that this movie is 2.5 hours long, whereas the first movie was only like an hour and 40. And most of that first movie is action, whereas this movie, I don't know how much of this movie was just action, but it felt like it was taking up a much less percentage of the film because it was so long. And this movie doesn't have any scenes that I would call bad. It's all necessary to the story that it's trying to tell, but my problem with it is that it just feels too long. And it kind of gets me wishing that it was just shorter. And if it was shorter, then I probably would say it's just as good as the first movie, but unfortunately I can't say that because that runtime just kind of kills it for me, and it also makes me not want to revisit this movie. Unlike the first movie, where I could easily rewatch that first movie right now, whereas the second one, I'm not rushing back to it. But one thing that I did want to mention was that this movie did have a bigger budget than the first movie, and it does show. And I felt like I was watching a movie that had more production value, and you get to see a variety of different locations. The first movie is just one building. This movie, it has a few different locations. There's a car chase in this movie, and I think that car chase is awesome. And one thing that I forgot to mention about the first movie, and it wasn't a huge deal because it wasn't every 5 seconds, but whenever this movie and the first movie, whenever it uses CG blood, it doesn't look convincing all the time. There are points where it kind of takes me out of it a little bit, but for the most part it looks pretty good, and I'm fine with it. And the action scenes in this movie are very fast-paced, and any CG blood that I do notice, it's 1 second in the film, and then it just keeps going, and it's it doesn't really ruin my experience while watching these action scenes because it's so few times that I notice it. So I don't really take off points for it. And that also applies for the first movie as well. I would say the same thing. Overall, this movie, I appreciate it. I think that there's a lot to like about it. And conceptually, I think this movie is pretty great. And I liked what they did with the story and how they expanded on it. And there's tons of ideas that I love. I love the action scenes. Just like the first movie, the stunts were impressive, and it's violent, and for the most part it looks convincing. And there are some memorable scenes in this movie, but as a whole, it doesn't stick with me as much as the first movie. But on its own, I think this movie is really, really good. And I would recommend that you check this movie out. Even though I feel as though I've been somewhat harsh on it, just constantly comparing it to the first movie. It's kind of impossible not to, because it is a sequel, but on its own, it's really, really good. Definitely worth watching. And check it out once you have the chance. And with all that being said, I'm going to give The Raid 2 a 7 out of 10. Thank you for watching my videos as always. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to leave a like and comment down below you thought of The Raid 2, and my social media links, they will all be in the description, so follow me there. And last but not least, subscribe to be a part of Foley Nation, and I'll see when I get my next review up, and that is going to be for Licorice Pizza. So look forward to that, but until I get that up, thank you for watching and have a great day.